Hey, I'm Nicholas, and you're watching Posers Must Die. Today, I'm joined by a guest, Jack Kent, professional cartoonist and graphic designer, and also heavy metal rocker. He's also been my friend for over 20 years, and he's joining me today. We're just going to talk about some of our early concert experiences back in the 90s and the year 2000, and just talk about what it was like back then. Just the experiences and what it was like in a not being metalheads in a not very metal time.
That's well said. I like that. Being metalheads in a not very metal time. Yeah, that was quite the era, my friend. Um, I couldn't agree more. For me, going to my first concert in March of '98, I was 16 and we were living on the Oregon coast. So driving up to Portland was like a huge deal and bought our tickets at like, I don't know, Fast Ticks in Fred Meyer.
Yeah,
And
I remember doing that.
yeah, and my dad lived in Vancouver, so came up to stay with him, and then he drove us down to the show, and it was Life of Agony was technically the first band I ever saw live on like a concert because they were the opener, and I had no idea what to expect. Getting crushed up against the barricade, just like awesome general admission. So you're a kid and just like, yeah, front row, right? That's gonna be the best. Because you're closer, even though you can't breathe and everything. The mix is terrible. Doesn't matter. I'm close to some heavy metal rockers, so that was fun. And after Life of Agony was Cold Chamber, and then Megadeth came out, and it was the Rust in Peace lineup still. So that was they were touring for Cryptic Writings.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, this was Nick was still on drums at this point, so it was a really cool show, and I feel very grateful to have seen that lineup of Megadeth, and I would probably say are my favorite band, even though over the years it's kind of been a love-hate relationship, but I always go back and go, it's probably the one I know the most of and know the best of. So that's my first gig. What about you?
There you go. Yeah. You said it was at 97?
That was 98. Yeah, technically March 7th is what I got. I got a whole list right here that I'm
Oh,
looking on.
okay, okay,
Yeah, March 7th, 1998,
okay.
Roseland.
My first concert was okay, so you remember Portland, Oregon, we used to have that rock radio station, Rock 101 KUFO.
I do.
And for like 13, 14 years, they had a rock festival every summer. And I went to the first one in summer of 1996. And it was not that I was like dying to see anybody on that bill, but I was just so hungry to see rock anything, anything.
Yeah,
And my mom told me like, "Oh, you should save your first concert should be something special, like a favorite or whatever." But I do. She was right. To her credit, she was right because now I tell people my first concert, and it's like Candlebox and Gravity Kills. Really?
that's a mix, man. That's
And I don't even remember like the other. There was a bunch of other bands on the bill. I don't even remember. Oh, there was one. There was one that was noteworthy for another reason. Uh, so when I was like 14, 15, I started going like digging like through crates at the record store in Gresham and finding all these obscure old metal records for like $3 to $6. Okay. And one of them was Whiplash's first album, Power and Pain. And the founding members of that band were all named Tony. Okay. And the bass player's name, there was Tony Scaglione, Tony Portaro, and Tony Bono. Tony Bono on bass was in this alternative rock band in the 90s called Into Another. And they played at that festival. And so I'm seeing a band, a member of a band that I like at the time that I had no idea.
I love that stuff. And I think what this era is so great about is it's a lot of I mean, it's always going to be this way, but for me, I feel, especially in the heavy metal realm, of a lot of bands trying new things. So they pull different bands on tour with them. Other bandmates are going solo, like Rob Zombie goes solo from White Zombie. Halford's doing his thing, so on and so forth. And it's a really interesting time because I think you get a really cool, like, oh, like I saw Corn, and I was most stoked to see Borden on drums of Faith No More. And I was like, Mike Borden was in the band at the time, and it was really cool to be like, oh, he's on drums, and it was cool to like see that. And I saw Borden again at Ozfest because he was Ozzy's drummer,
Oh
so it was
yeah.
kind of these like cool like overlapping stories.
Yeah. I got another one like that that I'll touch on later. But yeah, that's interesting. And it's so funny you mentioned Halford was doing that thing. I remember he had that industrial project too.
Too, yeah,
And they came to Portland and people I knew went to that and they're like, yeah, we met Rob Halford.
yeah, that
I'm like,
was that was a really wild time. I mean, because yeah, like 'cause Rob Halford got in touch with I think Trent Reznor, who produced that album, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a really cool book, the second book that Halford's released. It's his autobiography where he really goes into a deep dive of two, and it's really fascinating.
I'll have to check that out because like I remember that. I never heard the record, but I remember like the radio, they played a song or so from it, but I don't remember it, you know?
Yeah, it's all right for the genre of what it is, but it just isn't anything like, wow, I need to put that on again. It's got some hook stuff. I mean, because Halford's a great musician
Right.
and Trent Reznor's a great producer and musician. So it's it is listenable, but is it memorable? Because we've got them in different arenas in our brain of what they are.
Oh yeah. And like, you know, people have different things inside them too. And like you have to be able to be like, you know what? I got this other stuff I want to try out over here. And
Mhm.
that's okay, especially for like side projects or whatever. I think Halford, he can never sustain any non-priest project. Like it's never good for more than one record. Like I
Yeah,
don't remember two, but Fight was the first album was good. Second one, completely forgettable. Uh Halford, the band. First album was incredible. Second album, nothing to write home about. So he needs great other guys to work with. As great as he is.
yeah, yeah. I enjoyed Crucible, but that's
Like it
I
didn't
like the second
suck.
one.
It didn't suck. It's better than the second Fight record. I'll say that. But
Yes.
but yeah. But anyway, what was that next big concert for you, Jack?
Going on the kind of the metals train here. Got Jojo chiming in the background. He wants to chime in some heavy metal dog barking.
Oh,
Um, I would probably say it was Metallica in September of '98.
September of '98. Now, was that at the Portland Meadows?
Yeah,
I was there. That
yeah,
was
that
at that
was
show.
yeah, that would be my we're still living on the Oregon coast at that time. We drove up into see the Oregon coast, growing up on the Oregon coast, your temperatures all year round are either 55 or 65. And so
Oh,
when
right.
when we drive up to Portland, it's like 100, and the Portland Meadows is just dusty and hot. It
Yeah.
was the most unfortunate weather
Oh,
for a metal show. And well, I use metal. It wasn't metal because Days of the New, not metal.
and
Jerry
Jerry
Cantrell,
Cantrell.
not metal. It was just a snooze fest, man. I was so kind of bored for those opening bands.
Yeah.
And super stoked to see Metallica finally. Here we go. Yeah, it is on the Reload tour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, this is going to be so great. And there were moments where it was, and then
Yeah.
there were
I mean,
moments when a smaller drum kit comes out, and we're like, hey, what are they going to do? And they
okay.
bust out this acoustic set of like Four Horsemen, and it was just like, what? And this is what I was talking about earlier of bands trying different things, going different ways, and it's like I kind of can't fault sometimes that, but it's like, I just Four Horsemen acoustic live.
And like
That's like,
his
mm,
the
I just,
Load albums, if those were a side project, people would be very more generous about how they feel about them, I think.
yeah, and I think generous is a thing. I'm not the biggest fan of the argument of like, oh, if they weren't Metallica, they'd be good. And I'm like, no, those are a one, those albums clock in at over 70 minutes.
They're
That's
long
that's too
albums.
long.
Yeah.
It's too long.
Yeah,
It's
it is too long.
it's too
And that's
long to
the era
inundate.
problem. Let's fill the disc is what
Right.
the idea in that era. And it's like, no, because you and I, our favorite music is from the era when like albums are like 28 minutes to 45 minutes,
And
you
eight
know?
tracks, eight, maybe nine tracks.
Yeah, 8 to 12 songs. And it's like the CD era was really like the end of like a lot of there being lots of great albums because
Mhm.
there's so much filler material to take up all the space. Look how all the value we're getting. It's like
Yep.
half of this would be twice as good.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like the Guns N' Roses Illusion albums. You could take those two records, strip it down to one amazing album. I mean,
maybe. But yeah, I mean, those records really have not aged well, I will say.
no, it's just excess. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
it really
But
is. It's like,
um,
remember for like 4 or 5 years, they were the biggest thing in the world.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
great.
I mean, I growing up on MTV like we did, it was I felt it was Enter Sandman, November Rain with and like Smells Like Teen Spirit and like Pearl Jam's Jeremy and like we're on this like rotation of like
Yeah.
all you saw.
I mean, yeah, that's 1991. That's 92. Yeah. Um, so the Metallica show, you remember what song they opened with though?
I don't.
I do. It was Bread Fan. And that was such an electric moment. Uh, so cool. So cool.
Yeah,
But I had a good,
I wish I remembered that. That's a killer opener.
yeah, that was a really great choice. And I have to take like I got to see Metallica. I got to see Jason Newsted
Mhm.
and I had fun, you know. Uh I count myself lucky I got to see all of the big four by the time I was 19, you know.
That is good. Yeah, I wasn't there yet.
Yeah. Um Let me go to my next concert. Why don't we
Yeah,
set
yeah.
1997, my next concert is the next KUFO Rock Fest. Interestingly
So,
enough, oh,
question, where are these at? Are they at the Meadows?
so the first two were not at the Meadows, they were at the Ski Bowl or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I think that's out in Estacada.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's where they were. The first, at least the first two. I went to the first two, missed a year because I went to Metallica instead, and then did two more, and I was done for Rockfest. Um, but that year, so my dad had gone back to school, and he had a study buddy, a classmate who was a rocker, and he offered to take me to a concert, and I could have chosen Megadeth and the Misfits at the Salem Armory. But this guy, because he was offering to take me, and I knew he was a huge Van Halen fan, I said, why don't we go to the Rock Fest? Because Sammy Hagar was the headliner. Corrosion of Conformity was on the bill. So my first proper metal band, I think, 1997.
Yeah, COC.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it to him. Um, uh, and I went to that, and that was cool. It was great to see Hagar. I saw him again. I saw him the second time 25 years later.
Agar, that was, I mean, he probably had that. Oh, he had that
Marching to
March
Mars.
Mars. Yeah.
I think that was the one. I think that was out at that time. And that was a strong record from him too. I want to say it was his first one post Van Halen.
Hmm.
I'm not sure about that, um, but yeah, Days of the New were on that bill too. So
God.
and,
And
and
I don't dislike Days of the New. I just felt like
they are so just
I feel like it's like, what are you doing with like Metallica? What are you doing on these like heavier stuff? But I mean, they're all, I give them kind of like, you're fine at what you do. Like to me, Jerry Cantrell was the most boring thing I've ever heard in my
yeah,
life.
yeah.
Anyway,
I've heard he's very nice.
yep.
Musically, he's never been like, oh my God, for me. But also on the KO for Rockfest was that Guitar Hero Gary Hoey, who
Hmm.
very cool. So that was good, and I feel that was pretty metal. And Seven Mary Three, who were like a very mainstream rock band at the
Yeah.
time, but they were so close to metal. You know what I mean? They were all
Yeah.
a heavy metal band.
Yeah. I haven't
So
heard of that
like,
band in a long time.
no, I know. Uh, but yeah, so that was the second one that I went to, and I had fun. That was a fun time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my next one would be so we're for me, January of 99, still driving up from Newport to Portland, the big city. And
Mhm.
we're seeing Black Sabbath's reunion tour,
Oh yeah.
and it's at the Rose Garden. And we're just we get out of high school, uh and we drive to Portland after school. Our friend's dad drives us, who also taught at the high school. Very cool dad.
Very cool.
And so he drives us all the way up. And that lineup is Incubus,
Hmm.
then Pantera.
Hmm.
And at the time, I actually was unfamiliar with Pantera and kind of didn't really care. It was the show that turned me,
That's Sarah.
yeah, that turned me on to them, and like, oh, like, because one thing in Newport, I mean, I don't have internet, and internet
Oh,
is in its infancy growing up in the
yeah,
late 90s. So
yeah.
my upbringing is very, very basic. No TV, no internet. Um,
Yeah.
and so getting new music, our music store with Fred Meyer. So it
Right.
was so any trip to the valley was like, we got to find a record store. And so
Right.
like that was tough to get into like new bands. So Pantera was kind of a blind spot for me at that time. Um, they did a great job. There's a YouTube video that somebody recorded of that show in Portland that I found years later. And like they open up with my favorite Pantera song, Domination.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's a strong
and
one.
they may not open up with it, but they do play it.
Sure.
And then Black Sabbath came out and was a phenomenal show. I hear that Ozzy was really sick, and so
Oh,
they cut a bunch of songs off that set list. So it was a shorter set, unfortunately. But for what they did, it sounded phenomenal.
well, okay. Um, yeah, I had friends who went to that. I didn't make it to that. I wasn't able to for whatever reason. Um, yeah, I remember people, my buddy who went, he said like, oh yeah, people were throwing shit at this band Incubus who sucked. Uh, and it's like later they kind of had a big splash for a minute, but
Yeah,
yeah, I always thought they were lame personally.
yeah. I was kind of like, what is the? Yeah, no, not my bag.
Yeah,
But after the show, I mean, it's January. I mean, we drove back that night, and my
yeah.
buddy's dad drops us off. He drops me off at my house, and it's probably 3 a.m.
Whoa.
And we we all go to school the next day. Like I remember getting on the bus with my Black Sabbath t-shirt, and I was like, I'm on zero sleep. I'm ready to rock and roll, go back to school. And because going to school wearing a concert shirt from the night before was just our favorite like badge of honor. It was
Yeah,
like one of my favorite things, and that was one of my favorite shows.
nice. Well, that's cool, man. That's a good show. That's a great story. Trying to think. So, and this year that was 99?
That was, yeah, January of 99.
Okay. I somewhere in 1999, I saw the Misfits in Guar.
I did too.
You were there.
I was there.
Okay. I love it.
I got
And
it. Here you go. It was October 22nd, 99 at the
okay.
Rose.
Yes, and that was an awesome show. That was very cool. Uh, I was so into the Misfits at that time and loved their new singer. And, I was already a Guar fan, so that was just a great night for me. Um, I I don't have a whole lot to say about that one. It was just fun.
Yeah, that was a show where I was my back went out, and so I remember standing at the railing in the back and just propped up against it, and like, yes, it's Guar, it's Guar, it's Guar. I'm finally seeing Guar,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, Misfits, this is awesome, Misfits, 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 and I'm just like dying in the back, and
Oh,
I think I'm all of 18 years old, and I've already got like my back problems.
shit. Yeah. Oh, it's so funny because I remember that show was the first time I remember being past handbills for future shows.
Oh, interesting.
And I remember specifically getting bills for the Sam Hain reunion, who I didn't know Sam Hain at the time. I knew of Danzig and I knew the Misfits, but that band was like, I didn't know any of their music yet. And also the SOD reunion,
Oh, nice.
which I didn't see that show either. And I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
handbills.
huh?
Yeah, that just like really fired a bunch of like neurons in my brain of like, yeah, somebody else out after the show just handing all this stuff and like little, you know, little sheets with upcoming shows. And yeah, you just stuff them in your pocket and then you get home and you're like, what's this? Like, oh yeah, a show.
Yeah. Jack, did you see Megadeth on the Risk tour?
I
Also,
did. I
okay. I
I
was
called, what's it, you were there too?
yeah.
So Megadeth, excuse me, KUFO
Yeah.
had a giveaway where they would play three Megadeth songs simultaneously.
Oh,
If you
simultaneous
can, yeah,
or in
if you,
succession.
yeah, all overlapping
Oh, okay,
all
okay.
at the same
I got
time.
you. Okay.
So if you could pick out what three songs those are,
Hmm.
you get backstage passes. So I was able to call in and be correct because I was obsessed with Megadeth, and so
Okay.
I got it. I still and I'll have to. I have that recording somewhere of me winning that off the radio. I was
Oh
so
my gosh.
geeked out I recorded it. Anyway, um, so I win the tickets, and I'm 18 at the time, and I'm paranoid because I'm like, shoot, is meeting the band like a 21 and older thing? Because Craig the dog faced boy, the old DJ there, made a joke. He goes, you can get your beer money and go hang out with Dave and the boys. And I'm like, uh, I, I I'll just go and find out. And he goes, okay, you'll get your tickets down at Will Call. And I'm like, who the hell's Will? You know,
Oh man, you
I've,
don't know this stuff because you're a
I've,
kid.
I have no idea what's going on. So I'm like, okay, I'll just go down and I go to the Roseland and I'm like, tickets I won. Da, da, da. And they go, we got you, we got you, we got you. Show my ID, all good. So I'm like, awesome. Got my pass, and they kind of escort us, small group of people downstairs, down below the Roseland Grill downstairs, and we're hanging out and we're waiting. And Dave has an aura like no other. I mean, an ego that will just immediately fill the room, and you just
Oh,
know he's there. And it was nice watching a lot of videos like Penelope Spheris's decline. So I kind of somehow over that and seeing other videos got to know of this. And so when I met Dave, I'm wearing my Black Belt Club T-shirt because I'm in Taekwondo as he was too. I
oh
saw
yeah.
him in like a metal magazine with the same shirt. I'm like, oh, I'll wear the same shirt. We'll talk about martial arts. And I go to meet him, and I hold out my hand to shake his hand, and he goes, I'm kind of disappointed that you didn't shake my hand the correct way. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you didn't shake it in the traditional Taekwondo way. So we re-shook hands in the traditional Taekwondo way. So he insults my handshake.
Oh
And I go, I'm gonna go talk to Marty, and which was Marty's like second to the last show.
no no
And
no. Oh, on the wrist tour. Yeah, yes, yes, yes.
yeah, on the
Okay.
wrist tour.
Yeah, yeah.
Talked to David, and Jimmy DeGrasso just joined the band. Like, I think Woodstock 99 was July, so he was just in the band for that. Then in the wrist tour, he's just a baby in the band, but he was incredibly nice. But
Wait, wait. So Nick Menza was out at that time?
yeah, Nick Menza wasn't on Risk.
Oh,
It was Jimmy.
my memory was fuzzy then. Okay, okay.
Yeah, but Jimmy, poor, nobody knew who Jimmy was, and I was like, thanks to Penelope Spheris, I was like, Wayne's World, Jimmy, Alice Cooper, you were in his band, and
Yeah.
so I kind of talked to Jimmy real quick about that, but really, really nice, and yeah, that was my Megadeth experience. Finally met my idol, and they always say don't meet your idols, and partially true, partially not true, but at that time I was like, okay, maybe, maybe not so much, but I met Dave.
Yeah.
Dave's Dave.
Yeah, Dave's Dave. Did you get to meet Marty?
I did. Yeah, I talked to Marty real quick. Marty's in. I met Marty actually on my very first concert out back. He signed autographs and talked to
Oh
him.
wow, right on.
Yeah, he's incredibly nice.
I've heard that. He's
Yeah,
a
he's
guy.
very down to earth and just kind of a guy who likes guitar playing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, I'm glad of that. I'm really glad for that. Trying to think, what's my next one? We were in 1999.
Yeah.
I think my next one is the KUFO Rock Fest that was the day off for the Ozfest bands because it
Yep.
was all that new metal shit and Megadeth.
Yep. I was there too. So this is like kind of back in time, like 6 months earlier, the summer before.
Oh, okay, okay, that's right. That's
Yeah.
a little fuzzy for me.
But Jimmy's there in the band at this time on drums for
Oh, is
Megadeth.
he? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Um, was this the show where Dave was talking about Gar Samuelson had passed recently, and he mentioned that on stage?
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
because Gar passed on
Bastille Day.
Steel Day. Yep.
Hmm.
So that was
Uh,
like 4 days, I think 4 days or 4 days before this gig, I think.
something like that.
Something
Yeah,
like that,
it's
yeah.
crazy. Um, but uh, but yeah, we saw a bunch of new metal. We saw Primus and Silverchair and Static X and System of a Down and Godsmack and Buck Cherry, who are a hair metal band with short hair.
Yeah, Buck Cherry was I did buy their first album. Other than their big hit Lit Up, nothing really like
Yeah, I remember thinking
rocked
they
my
were kind of
socks
cool at
off.
the time. Don't Crucify Me, America. It was 1999. Okay, I
Yeah,
was 18 something. Uh,
yeah.
um, but um, but that was a thing. But so at the time, I'm in high school. And a classmate is a big Primus fan. I really didn't care about them, but I went to the signing and got like a postcard or something signed by them for my classmate. Well, and I meet Larry Lalonde, who was in Possessed and Blind Illusion. Oh, I mean, Les was in Blind Illusion too, but yeah, but I didn't know I didn't know, I'd never heard of Possessed at that time. So
Yeah.
Larry was really nice.
And that's that this cool era we were talking about where you get all these bandmates kind of like all that overlapping stuff and it's just cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, what about you? Another concert?
I mean just hitting off that putting a bow on that rock fest.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Like no, you're good. Like because they opened the gates late. And so I remember we got to see one song of Static X. Static X's set was pretty much done by the time we got to catch like one or two songs. And then
Okay.
System of a Down come out. And I remember like that band was just a whole I was not ready for them yet. I was not ready for what they were going to become. And I was just that era for me was a lot of I don't understand. I don't get this new genre that's coming out.
And I was right there with you. I think you and I talked when we hung out recently, like about trying to hang in the alternative rock and new metal era, and but just like not getting it or not think this is this is okay, but like, man, but like, what about Judas Priest and Scorpions? Like that shit rules, so
Yeah, it's hey, art changes and it has to change, which is good. And it's good to be challenged. It's good to go
yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
what is going on? That's a great spot to be at. But as an
Yeah.
18-year-old kid, you're kind of like, I've driven all the way and I want to really rock out the songs I know and I have no idea what's going on. But that's on me for not maybe doing my homework. But
Yeah.
it
But
was an
also
interesting time.
I loved these festivals because it was a chance to see a lot of bands. It was, I think you were
Yeah.
getting, I think maybe at the mentality I had was like, okay, I'm getting a lot of value here, and I'm gonna be able to check out some stuff, and maybe I'll find something that I do dig, which I didn't find with that era because there just wasn't my kind of stuff. There weren't new bands doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Of that rock fest, I am glad to have seen System of a Down. I do uh respect that band as a whole and was glad to see them that early in their career, only one album out.
Mhm.
But yeah.
And their image was like they were still wearing like make that silver and gold makeup and shit.
Mhm.
And people just really didn't know them. And then they became huge. You
Yeah.
know, I never got on board with the vocals And I think that's what kept me from being a fan. But I mean, later they even had some like real heavy metal like lead breaks in songs. I'm like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. Trying to think. Once we get to 2000, I kind of like my timeline of like what I saw like in high school versus graduation is kind of fuzzy. I
Yeah. Yeah.
I may have seen Motorhead in 1999 or 2000, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I went looking for my old ticket stubs. I'm like, oh, that's in storage, so I could not confirm or deny. I
Have
saw
you
Motorhead a couple times, but what?
have you heard of the website Setlist FM?
Yes, in fact, I was on there today. Um,
It's a
but
very helpful tool.
great tool. I love it. But I wasn't, that was a little too vague for me to dig up today. Um, but I do recall uh, two very important shows for me in the year 2000.
The
Uh,
year 2000.
I love that. I say that all the time still. Conan, that's like his best bit, like ever, in the year 2000. Um, so I remember, oh yeah, three shows from 2000 that were there like very, very important.
Hit me.
First was my graduation gift from my folks. My folks got me Kiss tickets, but this was the era when you go to the sporting goods store to get tickets.
Yeah, GI Joes.
Yeah, Joe's. And they've got tickets for Seattle when
Oh,
there was a Portland date. And I
oh,
don't know why that happened, but it did. And so my friend and I, we drove, and his car broke down on the way. So we didn't get to see Kiss. So I had to spring for Kiss ticket for myself to go see the Portland show. And I had a great time, but I hate going to concerts by myself, especially arena shows.
it's
But
the worst.
it's so lame. And it's like people will talk about how sad it is to go to the movies by yourself. Like I don't have that issue, but going to an arena rock concert by yourself is so sad. Yeah,
Done it.
but it was the original Kiss, Ted Nugent, and the Backless Skid Row, and that was an all killer lineup for me at that time. I feel the way Gary Holt from Exodus feels about Ted Nugent. I don't agree with anything that comes out of his mouth, but I agree with 100% what comes out of his guitar.
Well said.
Yeah, and that's Gary, not me, but I agree with it. Um, and the Backless Skid Row was pretty cool. Um, I'll take it. It was fun. They were one of my favorite hair bands at the time. So, uh, uh, oh, uh, I got something I'll come back to. Do
Okay.
you have another one or
Yeah, like 2000. Let's get up to Ozfest in the Gorge in
yeah,
2000, which I now this tour is Pantera and Ozzy are like the headlining.
yeah,
Now I know Pantera, and now
yeah,
I'm very excited. They just did Reinventing the Steel, and
good,
I'm soaking that album up.
yeah.
And so
I
my
was
buddy and
very
I,
into them in the 90s. I was very into them in the 90s. So
yeah, and Reinventing the Steel is a slamming record. I really like that record a lot. It's
that
probably
it is.
one of
Here's the
my
thing though, because Far Beyond Driven and Great Southern Trendkill are like kind of like the sag point in those five albums. And Reinventing the Steel was kind of like a really like they swung back and like this is a good swan song for them, you know?
Agreed. And that album for me is the one Pantera album where I was like, I'm a fan of this band, and now you've released an album while I'm aware. I'm not like, oh, I've obviously like Cowboys. I'm like in third grade, so I'm like obviously I'm not going to know that.
Right.
So as finally they did an album where I'm cognizant of this band's um, presence, and
And the first
Ozfest.
new album of a band you really like, the first new record that comes out after you've gotten into them is always special.
Yeah, yeah. I'll always hold Iron Maiden's Virtual 11 in a very special spot. It's a terrible album, but that's the record that was my first Maiden record where I'm like, I know this band, and like, oh, they did a new album.
Yeah.
But I digress. The
Yeah.
Ozfest in 2000. Now I'm living in Vancouver, Washington, and my buddy and I get up early in the morning and we power all the way to the gorge. We are in super heat, sun. It is nasty and hot. And we're like, who is this guitar player with all these artificial harmonic squeals? And it's Zach Wild's Black Label Society, who
Right.
wasn't on the list. I think he just
Oh,
got added on later.
oh,
And we come over the crest of the gorge. If you know the gorge, you kind of are on top of the hill, and then it comes down to the stage. And we hear all these squeals, and then we hear a break in all the music. And Zach goes, Pearl Jam fucking sucks. And everybody goes bonkers. And got the last song of Black Label Society. And then the lineup from that was POD, no thanks. Got to see Incubus again, no thanks. The Methods of Mayhem, which was Tommy Lee's like rap
oh,
rock
that
thing.
band.
It was
Boo.
awful. It was so bad. Static X was on that, which was cool. A band called Pitch Shifter, a band called Reveille. Then Godsmack came out, and I like the first Godsmack record. I think they just did another record that they were just about to promote, and then Pantera and Ozzy. And Ozzy had didn't have Zach on guitar. He had a younger kid. God, what is his name? I know people are probably yelling at the screen right now. Holmes,
Oh, Josh
Joe
Holmes.
Holmes. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that
I think
he
that's right. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he shredded. It was a pretty good set, and then afterwards we got in my Honda Civic and drove all the way back to Vancouver, and we pull into my dad's driving driveway right as the sun's coming up. And what I want to say about this is the energy of your youth of like 19, 20-year old. I couldn't even imagine doing something like that today.
Oh man, I could never stay up all night. I would be
Like,
sick for days.
yeah.
Seriously,
And
I
and
can't do it anymore.
and
Cannot.
we were just like we're metalheads, but like we didn't party. We didn't do any. We don't do anything. Like we do Coca-Cola and burritos from 7-Eleven. You know, it's like that's just what we do. And it's like so. We were like, oh, all these people are like, oh, let's party at Ozfest. We're camping, we'll party. And like, this wasn't our scene. So it's just like,
Yeah,
I don't know, man. Hey, to each your own. You
sure.
get your rocks off how you get your rocks off. But if anybody's like, oh, you just drove all night, just get all lit up and just drive. I'm like, no, we're just
Yeah. I think you had the smarter plan, Jack. It
uh
reminds me in I think 1998, I almost got to go to an Ozfest. I did make it to Ozfest 2004. But in 1998, a good buddy of mine got me a ticket, and I did not get to go because my folks were not going to let me go see Ozzy Osbourne. Like, which is hilarious to think that, like,
hey man,
this,
satanic panic was real.
oh my gosh. But like, I swear, like a couple years later, I got like an Osbourne's keychain stocking stuffer. Like, what is even, so it was just like, what are we even doing? But so I missed out on that. Um, Ozfest 98. Oh well, I got to see a really good one when the year I did go. So, um, but back to the year 2000. Two more very important concerts for me.
Yeah, lay it on me.
I saw so there was an upstart traveling metal tour that only lasted one summer. It was called the Tattoo the Earth Tour. And it was trying to do an Ozfest.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 40 bands or something, 30 or 40 bands. It was crazy. And I mean, the big bands on the bill were like, it was, okay, Slayer and Sepultura, which was the real reason I was there, okay? But like Slipknot and Hatebreed and Nashville Pussy and like a few bigger bands, and then
I
like
forgot all about that.
all the second and third string new metal stuff. It was
Yep.
so much of it. Like Mudvayne was there, Head PE. It was big that. Um, but uh, it was a great time, and hey, I checked off two major thrash metal bands on my list there. in getting to see Slayer and Sepultura. That was important.
Did you saw, was that Dave Lombardo on drums on that one?
I think that was Paul Bostaph at that time. I think Dave hadn't come back yet.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw Slayer 12 or 13 times, and about half of those shows were with Dave. So
Is that the band you've seen the most live?
no, but it is well, as far as national acts, maybe.
That's in, like, you're in double digits in a band. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the band Spellcaster from Portland. They became a national act. Um, I saw them probably 100 times, but that but they're not really a household name. As far as household names, I think Slayer is probably the band that I've seen the most.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
only saw them once. Damn.
Yeah. When did you see Slayer? Was it
Um, no, I saw him at the let's go down the list here. I saw Slayer a little bit later. Yeah, I saw him in '01 at the Roseland, and they
okay?
were doing I think that would have been, yeah, they just released God Hates Us All.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't know if I saw them again yet at that point. So I might not have seen that. But yeah, I saw them at least 10 times, but I think it's somewhere to like 12 or 13 times.
Damn, yeah.
Because you having seen bands multiple times at the Roseland, if you see them at the same venue a bunch, those shows kind of blur together. And so if I didn't
Yes.
keep like a regular tally, it's kind of like it's fuzzy. And so I
Yep.
have several bands that are like that for me, where I'm like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll say a dozen times with Slayer. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Tattoo of the Earth was a cool show though. And the other one was, I want to say it was the fall of 2000 or late summer or something. Um, but Anthrax, I saw Anthrax at the Roseland. It was John Bush on
John
vocal.
Bush, yeah.
Love John Bush. And Fu Manchu, who are cool, like stoner rock
Yeah.
band,
Hmm.
and REO Speed Dealer, who were just a rock band. Uh,
Yeah.
but it was great. It was great seeing Anthrax, and it was like, it was a low ebb for popularity for them, but it was great to see them in a more intimate setting, and just John Bush just killing it, man. He is just one of the greatest singers in rock ever.
Yeah.
And so that was a great time. And interestingly enough, Dan Spitz was not in Anthrax at the time, and the touring guitarist for that tour was Dave Sabo from Skid Row.
Oh, Snake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
See, that's what I love about that era. There's so many weird overlaps
yeah.
like that.
I want to say that. I want to say that's right because when I saw Alice Cooper, oh no, excuse me, not Alice Cooper. When I saw Blue Oyster Cult, they either had Dave Sabo or Rachel Bolan, also from Skid Row, in the band. And so I kind of get those two, they're a little fuzzy in my mind which one was which, but I saw members of Skid Row playing with other bands 2 times. How about that?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was a really good one. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. Do you have anything from that turn of the century to
Yeah. I mean, I I didn't see Dio, but I saw Dio.
right?
And this
Right?
was what's that?
Because you met him,
Yeah, so that was the kind of my fear of, like, oh, 21 and older shows is all ages. Dio
right?
comes around, it's 21 and older, it's on the Magica tour,
Okay.
and Craig Goldie's back in the band, and I wasn't old enough to get into the Roseland. So standing outside, craning my neck, listening to what I can hear on the street and waiting out back. And then hours later, kind of raining outside, classic like Portland night, and Dio comes out and signs autographs and hangs out with us, and couldn't have been a nicer guy. And that's kind of the come around of people saying, oh, don't meet your idols. Nope. So glad I met Dio. He was exactly what you hope for. The nicest dude, and it's somewhere. Yeah, the the autograph.
Oh, oh
So
man.
that stays with me. So that's was
Yeah.
really cool. And yeah, super cool guy. So that was a lot of fun. So that was in 2000. I did finally get to see Dio again in '02,
With
and
Heaven
then
and
a
Hell.
couple. And then in Heaven and Hell, yeah. So that was really great. But as far as 2000 goes, I would say for kind of this last little bit, it was my introduction to one of my favorite arenas. And it doesn't sound the best, but the vibe of the classic arena show, the Tacoma Dome,
Oh,
uh, is a really cool venue. And we saw Halford open up for Queensryche, open up for Iron Maiden.
oh, wow.
And Bruce Dickinson just got back in the band,
Yeah.
a Brave New World tour. And I remember standing in line with with all the other metalheads, and I did not know anything from Queensryche, nothing. So another blind spot. And growing up on the coast, I don't know Queensryche. Halford did the amazing thing of, hey, for this show, since we're in the Seattle area, Queensryche, you go on. This is kind of a home show for you. And so Halford opened up. So I hadn't seen Halford yet either.
Oh, wow.
And they play a really cool set, Halford does, where they do Into the Pit, is what I think they kind of open up with. They do some cuts off of the Resurrection. What album was not called Resurrection in the year 2000? Tell me. Um, or any video game type of thing. So Resurrection, great. They did pre stuff. But Queensryche was that show made me a fan. And that's what I love about live concerts and going in not knowing of bands, because I became a Queensryche fan not knowing anything of them. I became a Pantera fan not knowing anything. I became, funny enough, an Anthrax fan because I really didn't know Anthrax when they were doing the Gigantour with Megadeth. I knew of them, had a few songs, but when they play Medusa, I had no idea what Medusa was, which is like my favorite Anthrax song, and Joey Belladonna was singing. Anyway, going off on a tangent, but
Yeah,
back to the Tacoma Dome, back to Iron Maiden. That Iron Maiden show was great. And heavy metal at that time, I think in like that 2000 was the almost like maybe the darkest of the dark, especially for Maiden, because I remember standing around at the Tacoma Dome and seeing huge pockets of pavement or ground between people because it was like empty.
whoa.
They did fill it out. It's the dome. They're going to sell out. And, but it was kind of weird to be like, oh, there's like huge gaps of nobody here yet. And I was like, is metal really like this taboo? It was kind of weird to see
Yeah,
that. But Maiden came out, was front row, got to see Yannick throw his guitar around him, and it was a ball.
that's awesome. This reminded me of a couple of little things. The Dio thing, waiting in the rain thing. I remember just how frustrating it was being a fan of like classic heavy metal and like so many most of those shows were 21 and over at the time. You just couldn't
Mhm.
they just assumed nobody, born, after 1980 was into this and they couldn't be more wrong. So it's very frustrating. I never saw Dio live. With three members of Spellcaster, I attended his funeral. And we drove to LA in my Saturn and we attended his public memorial. And that was an incredible experience. Um,
That's
uh,
good.
but but yeah, but yeah, I think this is probably a good place to wrap. Jack, and I'm so sorry, I should have had you do this at the top. Please plug your comics and the work that you do.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Right now, I do Sketchy People, where I draw people of Portland and I notate where and when I saw them. And you could be next.
I
I'll
love
be at the Rose City Comic Con in September, so it's going to be a hoot and a half. Come on out, and my band Flocker Rocker, which is a comic band for gulls, we're hitting the studio tomorrow and are going to be laying down some serious heavy metal, seagull, squawk and roll, flock star type stuff. So it's going to be really great. New album probably later on this year.
That's awesome. For folks that don't know, Gulls is one of Jack's three comic strips. And this one is, the characters are, well, seagulls who are in a rock band. And so this concept where you're creating music to go along with that, I love that. Um, I because I know you, I know two of your one of your biggest inspirations is Gary Larson, in the Far
Mm-hmm.
Side. And I really see that Far Side energy in Sketchy People. And I
Thank you.
love the shit out of that one. That's my favorite thing to do. There's also Minus Tide, which is it's a single panel gag strip, but specifically about like beach
Yep.
coast kind of themed stuff, which is great because you're from the Oregon coast. So
Yeah.
that's very
Well,
fitting.
yeah. You know me really well. I didn't have to say a word. I should just let you take over, man. That was really good.
Man, from now on, Jack. Okay. It's the least I can do for 20 plus years of a cherished friendship, man.
Yeah,
Uh,
man. Likewise.
thank you. Uh,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me today, Jack. Um, and oh, plug websites where people can find all your stuff.
KentComics.com. There it all is. KentComics.com. That'll get you there.
And I'm gonna have a link to Jack's YouTube channel where you can see his like art walks and see him work on sketches and things. So you'll see that. Um, thank you again so much for joining me, Jack.
Thank you for having me.
All
Yeah,
right.
this was fun.
Awesome.
Metal, metal,
Yeah.
always.
Let's do this again, buddy.
Yeah,
All right. I like the effect you're using now.
I
Thank
know, man. Awesome.